Welcome back to seminary. So, yesterday, you remember, we talked chapters 50 through 52 and 54 and 55. We skipped 53. Today we get to do 53, but we're also going to do 56 through 58. So, I really like these chapters. These are the chapters about the 2,000 stripling warriors. Okay, so one thing I didn't really touch on is yesterday, it talks about the people of Ammon. The people of Ammon used to be Lamanites, now then were anti-Nephi Lehi's. When they changed their name, they buried their weapons of war and covenanted to never shed blood again. You remember that? They said, we will never do it again. Okay, well, fast forward, it's now been a few years, and they've seen all these wars and all this bloodshed, and they're willing to break this covenant that they've made to help protect their people because they're tired of seeing all the other Nephites go to war against the Lamanites to protect them, knowing that they just sit by, right? And the rest of the Nephites say, no, you are not to do that. You made a covenant, you stick with it. Okay, fast forward a little bit more then, not very much more, a little bit, and they say, well, we have these sons. Our sons did not make the covenant to not shed blood, so we are going to send them. And that is what comprises the 2,000 stripling warriors. They're the sons of the Ammonites. Okay? And so there's a lot of fighting and a lot of going back and forth in these chapters, but there's a few things I really want to cover. I'm going to go through the story first, and then I'll cover what I want to cover. So in 53, the 2,000 stripling warriors come up. Okay? And then I'm going to come back to them. I promise I'm not just skimming over them. They're super important. Okay, chapters 56 through 58. This is a letter. This is a letter from Helaman to Moroni. Okay, well, we've just followed Moroni and all that he is doing, Captain Moroni. We're now going to hear what Helaman is saying. Helaman led the stripling warriors. And so, we're going to hear what all he had to say. Okay, so I actually put a note here. I know it's probably backwards. And it says chapters 56 through 58, a letter from Helaman to Moroni. Just so we understand that so many times in the scriptures it tells this story, and then we go back and we're following this line, and then we go forward here, and then we go back and follow this line, right? Because there's so many different things going on. And so that's what this is we followed the story of Moroni, and now we're going to listen to what Helaman has to say. Okay? So, he talks about all these wars and these victories and their bloodshed and things. And they have a really hard time. They win a lot of battles, but they get a lot of injuries. And they're not always totally protected. They get injured. They're starving. They don't understand why the government is not sending them more soldiers because they need more soldiers. The Lamanites have tons and tons of soldiers, and they're not getting the backup that they feel they need. And as well as not getting backup, they're not getting the provisions. So they're literally starving. It talks about them in here about feeling like they were just going to starve to death and having a hard time. So, if you want to really read through these chapters, these are some great chapters. It's really not that long, 56 through 58, about the wars and taking over different things and some of their strategies that they go back and forth with. I really want to talk about the 2,000 warriors. Okay, we've heard many times the scripture, and this is in chapter 56, verse 7. And it says, they had been taught by their mothers that if they did not doubt, God would deliver them. That's a scripture that's quoted a lot of their parents teaching them and they knowing the truthfulness of the gospel. Okay? I'm going to go back and we're going to go start in 53. Okay, in 53, I have at the top of my page, there's a lot of marking here. It says, 9 things that make the 2,000 the best. Okay, this is going to, we're going to do a lot in chapter 53 here, but we're going to continue through the rest of our chapters. Okay, so I actually numbered these and wrote next to them. So if I underline something, I don't know if you can see, if I underline something here, then I wrote a number and I rewrote just in a self-explanatory thing so I didn't have to try to figure it out every time. Okay, so we're going to start in 16. And it says, but behold, it came to pass that they had many sons who had not entered into a covenant, that they would not take up their weapons of war to defend themselves against their enemies. Therefore, they did assemble themselves. So this is what I was talking about. The sons did not make the covenant that they would not shed blood. So they pick up their weapons of war, and it says they assembled themselves. So that's the first thing. Number one. Remember, we're going to have 9 things here. Number one, they're self-motivated. They assembled themselves. They didn't wait for anybody to call them. They didn't wait for any of that. They said, you know what, guys? We got to get this done. And they assembled themselves. Okay? That's our first one. Continue into 17. We're going to get our second one. And they entered into a covenant to fight for the liberty of the Nephites. Okay? So they entered into a covenant. And they're making promises, and it's a two-way promise. A covenant is a promise with God, right? It's a two-way promise, and so they make a covenant. It's important to make and keep your covenants if you want to be the best and you want to succeed. All right? Continue in verse 17, because we're going to get our third thing here. Okay. Yea, even they covenanted that they never would give up their liberty, but they would fight in all cases. Okay, I underlined here, fight in all cases. For number 2, I underlined covenant. Okay, for number 3, fight in all cases. They took a stand. They were not going to let anything get by. Okay, they stood up for what was right every single time, in all cases. It wasn't like, well, we'll let it slip this time. In all cases. Okay, now we're going to go to verse 19. And now, behold, as they never had hitherto been a disadvantage to the Nephites, underline this, they became now at this period of time also a great support. For they took their weapons of war, and they would that Helaman should be their leader. So that's number 4. I underlined that they would that Helaman should be their leader. They followed their leader. Who is our leader right now? It's President Nelson. And we follow him. We're supposed to follow him with exactness, with everything. When he says something, we're supposed to listen. And so that is what they did. They followed their leader. Okay, so I have a cross-reference here at the bottom of 19. So write your cross-reference, and it's going to be chapter 57. And we're going to go to verse 20 and 21 and 57. Okay. Yea, and they did obey. Whoop, I started at 21, sorry. We're going to start at 20 and 21. And as the remainder of our army were about to give way before the Lamanites, behold, those 2,060 were firm and undaunted. Yea, and they did obey and observe to perform every word of command with exactness. Okay, I underlined here, firm and undaunted in 20. In 21, every word, exactness. Yea, and even according to their faith, it was done unto them. And I did remember the words which they said unto me that their mothers had taught them. Okay, so remember a few weeks ago I asked the best advice your parents can give you. And a lot of you responded, not everybody did. If you haven't asked your parents for one piece of advice, ask them now. And this is what it is. I got some great pieces of advice. That always have your temple recommend. You should never be embarrassed to be caught what you're doing. Things like that, okay? So, they followed their leader, every word, and with exactness. They were firm and undaunted. Okay, these soldiers were between the ages of 15 and 21. These are the same ages as you guys, and they're going to war. They're willing to give up their lives to battle. Okay, we're going to keep going here. Okay, in verse 20, it says, and they were all young men, and they were exceedingly valiant for courage. Okay, I underline valiant and courage, and that's our number 5. they were brave. Okay, to be valiant and courageous is to be brave. Okay, and keep reading in 20 here. But behold, this was not all. They were men who were true at all times. Underline that, guys. Men or women who were true at all times. Okay, in whatsoever thing they were entrusted. So that's number 6. They were true at all times. Okay, so I also have a quote here by President Ezra Taft Benson, and I put right in the top of my thing here. I love writing things in my scriptures. And it says, if you're not true at all times, you're not yet a man. So now we move on to number 7. And we're going to be in verse 21 now. And it says, yea, they were men of truth and soberness, for they had been taught to keep the commandments of God and to walk uprightly before him. So that's what I underlined, is walk uprightly. That's number 7. To walk uprightly, guys, means that you can hold your head up high, put your shoulders back and head high, knowing that you are doing everything you can. You can be proud. You know that you have fulfilled what you have been expected to. Okay, so for number 8, we're going to jump over to chapter 57, and we are going to be in verse 27 here. Okay, and it says, now this was the faith of these of whom I have spoken. They're young and their minds are firm. Okay, that's what I underlined, is their minds are firm. And what that means is they're committed. They know with the truthfulness of what they've been taught, and they're willing to keep moving forward with that and to hold on to that truthfulness. So they're committed to their cause. Okay, for number 9, we're going to go to chapter 58, and this is going to be verse 40. Okay, but behold, they have received many wounds. Nevertheless, they stand fast in that liberty wherewith God has made them free, and they are strict to remember. That's the phrase I underlined here. Strict to remember the Lord their God from day to day. Okay, so it means they're strong in their faith. It says here that they've received many wounds. They've been in battle. They've had to attack people and retreat and attack and retreat. They've been starving. They haven't gotten the provisions they needed. And yet they remember God, and they're strict to remember him from day to day. So that's number 9, guys. Strong faith. These 9 things can absolutely 100% help you. President Ezra Taft Benson's quote, that if you're not true at all times, you're not yet a man. This is what we're striving to become. Okay? This doesn't mean that we have to do it all the time, because we're not there yet. If we were doing all these things all the time, we'd probably be perfect and we'd be translated. We're not there yet, but we're all working to become there. I love you guys. You're amazing. Keep up the work.